Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Strawberry Hill Podcast. I am your host, Mike Simmons. And of course, we are at the Shop Cigar Lounge down in Strawberry Hill, KCK. If you haven't came to visit us, please do. We got live music on the weekends. We got jazz music. We got wine night. We got cocktail class, which is coming up. So sign up if you haven't. And before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you follow us. We're on YouTube. Check us out. We're on Instagram also too. Please check us out if you haven't already. And today, this is a very special day. This is going to be a good podcast today. Today we have Miss Trish. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And if you guys didn't know, Trish is a new member here as of what? Well, couple weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So how did you get into cigars? Because I know you're pretty new.
I was a virgin 3 months ago, Mike. I did not know anything about them. I was invited by one of your other members.
Tim
Grimes, who's been on your podcast.
Yep.
And I told him I probably won't stay long. I don't like smoke. But then I sat down and the smell reminded me of my grandfather's pipe. It wasn't anything like cigarette smoke. I'd never been around anything else but pipe smoke and cigarettes. And I was like, it was nostalgic.
Yeah.
And everybody started educating me and telling me about cigars and how they're a little bit like wine. You have the sweeter ones and you have the more robust ones. And I didn't know that. I thought it was just tobacco. I didn't know. And I didn't know you didn't inhale it either.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people go straight to
maybe
inhale.
I'll try a sweet one. And the rest is history. I'm hooked now.
Yeah, well, now we got to get you. So you're still a little bit sweet cigars.
Mostly. I've had a couple Maduros now, but mostly sweet. I've had a few. I think Dave said this one was kind of a latte.
Yeah, I think so. Tobacco. Yep.
Yeah. It's the first time I've had that one.
Good. So are you originally from Kansas City?
Yes. I grew up all over the Kansas City area, mostly in Grandview. And then since then, I've been all over Kansas City still. Go back and forth between Kansas City, Missouri, and the Kansas side. Right now, I live in Strawberry Hill for the last
This is one of the best places to live. So how do you like living in Strawberry Hill?
I love Strawberry Hill. It's unlike any other neighborhood I've lived in Kansas City.
So what's so different about it?
The people. It's a close-knit neighborhood. You can't go anywhere without seeing somebody you know. And I love that.
Good. So you grew up around here, Kansas City. You said, where was it, Gladstone or Grandview? Grandview. And you were in the military, right?
I spent 10 years in the military.
10 years.
In the Air Force.
Air Force. Wow. 10 years. Where were you stationed at?
First base, Minot, North Dakota. Spent 2 years there. Second base, I went to Sicily, to Comoso, Sicily.
Oh, wow.
Spent a year there. Love that. Then we came back to Whiteman Air Force Base in Knob Noster, Missouri, where I spent the most of my career. And I did like a 6-month TDY to Egypt, Cairo, Egypt.
So you got to travel a lot being Air Force.
Yeah.
So what was your job title?
Security police. I guarded nuclear missiles most of my career.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of like being a fireman. You sit in a house and wait for an alarm to go off, which doesn't go off very often.
I would hope not. That would be a pretty.
Yeah, it was usually a rabbit or a squirrel or hawk or something on the site. So we would respond, chase it off, and then.
So is that what you did, like when you went to like Italy and Egypt?
Sicily was ground launch cruise missiles.
Or Sicily, yeah.
Yeah, so they were ground launch cruise missiles, which we don't have anymore. They got rid of those during the SALT treaty with Russia. They're basically missiles that are on a truck that raise up and shoot. And we lived training to defend those. You would set up in foxholes around these missiles and defend them until they launched. And
So what made you want to join the Air Force?
Honestly, I didn't at first. I almost joined the Marines or Army. My dad and grandfather were both Marines. Grandfather was in World War II, and my dad was in Vietnam. And I told them I was going to sign up for one or the other because they were offering a signing bonus of like $5,000. And they sat me down and they said, if you're going to go into one of the services, go Air Force or Navy. You're going to get paid just the same amount and work half as hard.
So you got
That's
the
the advice I ever got.
You got the cheat
because I
code.
didn't work for 10 years. Yeah.
So you did that for 10 years. And so you said your family, your dad and your grandpa were in it too? And
They were in the Marines.
Yeah, my dad was Marine and my brother was Army. And I was one of the only males in my family that didn't go to military. It was kind of like an unwritten rule in our family. It's like you either go to school or you go to military. And so I went to school, which, I mean, I probably would have went to the military if I didn't go to school, but I'm kind of glad I went that route. I mean, not that I'm like not military, but I don't think that was for me. But I guess I say that, but I was a police officer, so.
The only reason I went in the military, I was very immature. I knew if I tried to go to college, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go to class.
What do you mean you were immature? Like,
I was a very immature youth. Even as an adult, I'm very immature, but I knew I struggled going to class in high school. I knew in college there was going to be nobody there to put the fear of God in me to go to class, my father. And I just probably I'd have been partying and not going to class.
why did you get out of the Air Force? Your contract was up?
I think it was during Bill Clinton's tenure. It was in 95, and they were cutting back on the military. They were paying people to get out early. And I was kind of done anyways. I wanted to get out. I didn't want to. Most of my friends who were retiring in the military after 20 years were getting out and being small town police officers. Great job. I don't think police officers get paid enough for what they do.
Yeah.
They put their life on the line every day. And it just wasn't something I wanted to do. So I wanted to get out and learn a new trade while I was still fairly young. I got out, I think I was 29 when I got out. So I wanted to get out and learn a new trade while I was still young.
You were 21 when you got out of the Air Force?
29.
29, okay.
Yeah, I went in at 19.
Yeah.
Got out at 29 and kind of fell into my current career, but
And what is that?
Originally I got out and sold life insurance. Which
That's a hustle.
yeah, I was working really long hours, never saw my kids. Now I fell into the job I'm in now, which is a corporate recruiter. I answered an ad in a newspaper for sales, and it was like around 97. So that was when everybody was freaking out about the year 2000 on computers.
Y2K.
And so this was a staffing agency that would hire programmers to fix that. They said, you're going to make a ton of money. We'll show you how to recruit. And they taught me how to do it. And it's all I've ever wanted to do since.
Really?
Yeah. So I've been doing it for almost 30 years now.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I thought you were younger. And so you're saying like 30 years. I'm like, geez, that's a long time.
I'm 56.
You look good.
Thank
you. Look
you.
good for your age.
Thank you.
I always tell people they're like, oh, you kind of look good. I'm like, well, black don't crack. Yeah.
I tell people it's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on here.
Oh, you look great.
Thank you.
So you said you have two kids?
I have two daughters.
Two daughters. How old are they?
30 and 34.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
We got married at 19 and had kids at 22.
And how long were you married for?
30 years.
30 years.
Currently divorced, but she's still my best friend.
I know you guys are best friends. She came in not too long ago.
She's my best friend. Yeah.
She's super nice.
Yeah.
Even though I talked to her for a short time, but I liked her a lot.
Yeah.
You have to bring her back in.
She says she wants to come.
Oh, good. So you were married, you had two kids, so we're going to jump right into it. You ready?
Let's do it.
So when was like the point of like you knew you're like, you know what, this something's different, like the transition part, because like some people, it hits when they're younger, they figure it out, or some people it's older, some people they've always felt it. So I know this is like a controversial topic, and I know you know this, like you are family here, you know that.
Sure.
And I don't care what anyone says, like we all love you, everybody loves you here, you're our family. So, I want to thank you for coming on this podcast, because I know it's not the easiest thing to talk about, but I wanted people to hear your story, because it's a very powerful story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm like building it up now.
Yeah. So for the people that don't know me, I'm transgender. I don't know why I started dressing in women's clothes. I started when I was 11 years old. No idea why. It just felt right. It made me feel good, made me feel whole. And I did that the rest of my life and hid it from everybody in my family, hid it from my parents, from my brother. And then later on when I got married, I continued dressing in private.
Was it just like when you were dressing, was it just like kind of like, I guess like you were just at home by yourself kind of thing, or were you?
It started just at home when my ex-wife was out of the house working. I started finding ways to sneak out of the house, saying I'm going to go to the store. It's not a great story. I'm not proud that I lied to her so many years.
I'm sure she understands.
It's still my biggest regret that I lied to her for so many years about who I was. But I would say I'm going to go to the store, and I'd be gone for 2 hours. And I was usually at a park dressing somewhere or somewhere dressing and feeling like my whole self. And I hid it from her successfully for the majority of my life.
Yeah.
She found out when I was 50.
And how old are you now? 57?
56.
56.
Yeah. Both fortunately and unfortunately, the older I got, the more I realized I wanted to be Trish. And I still love her to death. Still my best friend, like I said.
Which is really cool to have that, still a good relationship with your ex-wife. Like a lot of people don't see
I'm very
that.
lucky to have her in my life still as a best friend. The older I got, the more I wanted to go out and be me. And I started finding more and more creative ways to go out in public and be me. And so 7-8 years ago, probably about 8 years ago, I started driving for Lyft. And I kept all my clothes in duffel bags in my trunk. I also coached soccer, so it wasn't uncommon to have duffel bags in my trunk. But it grew to where I had so many duffel bags. I had like 4 large duffel bags. My whole trunk was full because it was all full of shoes and clothes and wigs and makeup and all kinds of stuff. And started driving for Lyft, and I would say, I'm going to go drive. And it turned out originally I started driving for Lyft just on weekends to make money. But I realized it was a chance to get out of the house. And I would tell her I'm going to go drive for Lyft. But I wasn't. I was going and sometimes getting a motel room, dressing and being me all night, going out to the casinos or going to a bar. And it got to where I didn't want to go home anymore.
Yeah.
And I would be stuck kind of feeling that sense of dread, not wanting to go home. And I would just stay in the motel room until 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And she started to get suspicious. I think initially she thought I was having an affair with a woman. And I always did all...
I'm actually a woman. Or I feel like a woman. That's I'm just saying like the funny part. You're like, well, no, I'm not having an affair with a woman.
Right. It got to where she started getting suspicious though. And one day I went to go to the grocery store and I took her car and she searched my car and found it all. She kept it from me and didn't tell me for 3 months, which, wow, I can't believe she, kept it in. And, just one day we weren't arguing or anything, but she was just really moody and something was wrong. I could tell. And I said, you're acting really weird. What's going on with you? And she let me have it. Why don't you tell me what's going on in your trunk? Why you have all this women clothes and stuff? And, both the worst day of my life and the most liberating day of my life.
I bet.
I cried for hours. Couldn't talk. All I wanted to do was consider suicide, which is obviously the worst part of my life. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to deal with it. I was ashamed that I lied to her for so long. Embarrassed that she found all my stuff. And coming out is very hard for everybody.
Yeah.
This isn't a coming out story. It's a being caught story.
Yeah.
So that was very embarrassing for me.
Yeah, because I'm sure it's not the way you wanted to tell her.
Exactly, yeah. I had wanted to tell her for the last 5 or more years. We'd been to marriage counseling a few times. I just couldn't verbalize to a therapist why I was unhappy. It turned out after going to therapy, I figured out I was unhappy with me, not unhappy with her or anything. I was just unhappy being my previous self. So after maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of crying and not being able to talk, I finally said, I'll tell you everything. I realized this was where it was liberating. I could finally tell somebody and get this off my chest that I'm transgender. And I've been dressing since I was 11. I've been hiding it from my entire life, from my entire family, all my friends. And I said, before I tell you anything, I have to tell you we have to get a divorce. And I said, not because I don't love you, because I really do. And I still do love her. Mm-hmm. I said, but it's no longer fair to you, and it's not fair to me anymore.
Yeah.
And so I came clean, and I told her the whole story.
Sorry, I have to like really listen to this. I don't
fine.
even care about the cigar anymore.
Fine. There was lots of questions that I was answering for her. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, one of those was, do you like men as well? Which I also lied about and said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I've always been bi and hid that as well. It was hard enough coming out as transgender, but also coming out as bi. It was hard. So I lied, and she says, well, why do you have condoms and things in your car too? And I was like, you're right. This is extremely hard. I said, I do like men. And I said, at this point, I prefer men, which is also why we need a divorce. So it was very hard coming out. So I was able to at least come out and tell her after I was found out. Like, I don't call it my coming out story because I was a coward and couldn't tell her.
Well, it's not you're a coward. You just didn't know how to express yourself. That's how I feel.
Again, it's my biggest regret that I didn't have the courage to come out and tell her or anybody in my family at that point.
But I think it's not an easy thing to do.
Extremely hard.
It's not like there's a playbook on how to do it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's a life-changing moment, an event that you just can't just be like, all right, this is how I'm going to do it, and everything's going to work out perfect.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean,
I'm jealous of friends that have told me their coming out story, and they were like, oh yeah, I came out to my family and my fiance, and I'm like, how did that go? And they're like, it went amazing. And I was like, that's what I wanted. But I never had the courage to go through with it, so even though I'm the one that said I wanted a divorce, to my surprise, a week later, she filed for divorce. Totally floored me. Because I thought I was going to be the one that did it.
Yeah.
She was extremely mad. Totally understand. She probably felt like I wasted, 30 years of her life being married. We were together 33 years, married for 30. So I'm sure she felt like that I wasted her entire life. So she filed for divorce. We were trying to renovate our house, and we lived together for 7 more months after we were divorced.
Really?
Because I was doing all the repairs to the house to try and make it to where we can make a decent profit on the house. The first 3 months I slept on the couch, and we really didn't talk a whole lot. Very, very little, just whatever we needed to get off, to talk about.
So you didn't mention like your kids during this.
No, we didn't tell the kids. We told the kids we were getting a divorce. But we told the kids we were just chose different paths in life at this point. We had grown apart, and we think we need a different path for each of us. We wanted to stay friends, we said. At that point, I wasn't sure we were going to be friends at all because she was very angry, which rightfully so. I get it. I think our youngest took that very hard.
Now, how old were your kids when this was happening?
My youngest would have been 23. Oldest would have been 27.
Okay, so they're most likely out of the house.
The oldest was. The youngest wasn't. She had not moved out yet, but she immediately decided she was moving out. She didn't want to live with either of us, which I get as well. So for the first 3 months, we really didn't talk a whole lot. And just one day, my back was absolutely killing me from sleeping on the couch. And she's like, you know what? We're adults. We can sleep in the same bed.
Yeah.
We're divorced, but we're adults. Nothing has to happen. And she let me sleep in bed. And I felt like that was an olive branch she was extending to me. And we started talking more at that point. And then I think the big change happened. I had never knew what kind of style I wanted. Where do I want to live? Do I want an apartment? Do I want a house? I don't know what I always let her choose all the furniture and decorations. And so I was like trying to figure myself out. What do I want to be as a single person now? And I had been watching a show with her a lot called Flea Market Flip, where they take old furniture and make it new and make it their own. I was like, I love that. I like old stuff. I love antiques. And then I started figuring out I like the older houses and things like that. And I started going to thrift stores and antique stores and buying stuff. And one day she came home. She goes, "What's all this old stuff in the garage?" There's a trunk. And I was like, "I bought it." She's like, "Where?" And I said, "I went to an antique store and bought it." And since when are you into antiques? And it's like, I've been watching that show with you and I kind of like that stuff. And she's like, "I want to go." So we started going to antiquing together now. And then my youngest daughter was like, "Well, I want to go." Because she's trying to move out too now.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of started building our friendship again. And I started seeing a therapist almost immediately after coming out or being found out. Learning more about who I am as a transgender person. Because I honestly didn't know much about being transgender.
Yeah.
I had met.
I mean, like I said, there's no playbook on it.
There's really not.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I had going for me is before she found out, I had met another transgender person online who invited me to there's a dinner that happens every Wednesday in Westport, and they call it Girls Night Out. It's all transgender women. I mean, transgender men are welcome as well. Just for some reason, none come.
Yeah.
And we go have dinners and drinks, and you can talk about your feelings and talk about makeup. And you can talk about therapists and all kinds of things. And it was one of the most beneficial things for me because first time ever I'd met someone who was like me. And I think that's where I started downhill spiral where I wanted to get out more as me and being me. When I started getting around people who are like me and seeing that it's possible, still didn't know how to come out to my wife. And
so you did all this before?
Yeah, this was probably, so we've been divorced almost 7 years, and it was probably a good 3 or 4, maybe 5 years before we got divorced. So I'd been going out with these girls at least once a week. Some of them I'd go out with on weekends as Trish as well. And, getting to explore being me more often. Yeah. Instead of just going and being alone in a motel room.
So how did you, tell me the story, I guess, how did you tell your kids?
So that was an accident on both parts. So
really?
Yeah. So we got divorced. I moved out, and almost immediately I adopted a dog. And
is that the dog you still have?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Unfortunately, this dog passed after like 2 years. Got unexpectedly sick and died overnight. But she was laying in her kennel upside down with her feet up, and I walked over and took a picture of her and sent it to my ex and my daughter. Did not know my feet were in the frame and my toes were painted. And so it just so happened not long after that, my daughter was out with my ex and some friends. They'd been drinking, and my daughter just says, "I have a question. Is Dad gay?" And my ex said, "Well, he's bi. And, but that's not all." She goes, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, Dad's also transgender." And she goes, "I knew it."
Oh, yeah.
And she goes, "How did you know?" And she goes, "He sent me a picture of the dog one time and his toes were painted. And I knew something wasn't going on that was, something was different." And I had also been laying hints for her too. Like I was at her house one day putting together some furniture and she wasn't there. And I saw she had some Pride stuff. She goes to Pride every year. She has lots of gay and lesbian friends. And I messaged her and told her how proud I was of her, that she was so accepting of, people who are gay and lesbian and just things like that. She was putting hints together.
Yeah.
So she figured it out from asking her. My oldest daughter, even funnier, I was at a girls' night out and we would tie it on pretty good at dinner and we'd drink a lot. And I was reminiscing with one of my girlfriends there who I'd known for 3 years as Her name's Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
And she was showing me pictures of her kids on Facebook. And I was like, whoa, scroll back up. And it had her male name. And I go, how do you know? I was drunk. I wasn't putting two and two. How do you know this guy? She goes, that's me. And I go, I used to work with you like 23 years ago. You were one of the managers I supported. I was a recruiter for like 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And we were like, oh my gosh. And so I went to pull up my kids on Facebook, forgetting that my oldest daughter doesn't really like me and I don't have a relationship with her anymore. She had blocked me on Facebook. Mm-hmm. But I searched for, at that time I had a Scott Facebook, which is my previous name.
Uh-huh.
And I had a Trish Facebook. I no longer have that Scott one. I just have Trish. But back then I still had Scott. So Scott was blocked. So I looked her up as Trish. And I hadn't seen her Facebook in a long time. And the first picture I came to was a photo she painted of a deer. And it was vibrant colors, almost like the pride colors. And I liked it, not thinking about it. And within like 2 minutes, my youngest daughter messages me and she says, what are you doing? I said, I'm at girls' night out with my friends. Why? And she goes, your oldest daughter knows. I go, knows what? She says she knows that you're trans. I go, how? She goes, you liked a photo on Facebook. And she went and said, who's Trish? And pulled you up and figured it out. Uh-huh. So both times accidents, but it worked out. I'm glad they both know.
So with your oldest daughter, so your youngest daughter found out, and then your oldest daughter, like how long was it when your oldest daughter found out?
She found out about 2 or 3 weeks after I told my youngest.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was all relatively quick. Mm-hmm. And it was probably it was probably the same year or a year after we got divorced. Mm-hmm. So not long. And
so good relationship with your daughters now?
My youngest daughter, yes. Yeah. My oldest daughter, no. Not because I'm trans. Uh-huh. She just didn't like dad.
I gotcha.
Yeah, she cut me out of her life years ago and never really had verbalized it until this summer. Mm-hmm. This is past summer. She pretty much told me she doesn't want me around now.
Is that something that you're trying to work on, hopefully?
I am. I don't know if she is. Mm-hmm. We've known for a long time she didn't like me. I'll walk in the house and she won't talk to me, won't answer questions, just ignores me.
Yeah.
And she goes from being extremely happy to extremely angry when I'm there. Mm-hmm. I was the disciplinarian. I didn't spank. I yelled a lot though, and I cussed a lot. Not at her, but it's how I was raised. I didn't know any better. I was 22, and I made excuses for a long time. And the only thing we knew is she said I was verbally abusive, which she took cussing as verbally abusive, but I wasn't cussing at her. I just cussed when I talked.
Yeah.
I always told her she didn't know what that meant. I was physically and verbally abused as a kid. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I started going into therapy as Trish that we talked about that a lot, about my relationship with my parents and my daughters. And my therapist made me realize I don't get to choose what's offensive to her or anybody. That if it's offensive, I need to own that and apologize. And my head kind of exploded. I was like, holy crap, you're right. And so I've apologized to her and I've owned my part of the relationship. She's not there yet. Hopefully she gets there. Hopefully she gets there. And I've tried to tell her I've gone to therapy now and I'm a different person than I used to be. And hopefully she'll get to know me as Trish now, but we'll see. I'm hoping for it in the future, but.
Oh yeah. I mean, but it's good that you recognize it. And yeah, you went to therapy. Therapy helps a lot. I tell people.
I used to be totally against therapy while I was married. I'm 100% for it now.
Yeah, therapy is one of the best things to do. I actually went to therapy this morning. I go every about 3 months because I don't know, a lot of people know, I dealt with I still dealt with PTSD. That's one of the reasons
I can imagine.
One of the reasons why I left the sheriff's office, and therapy, saved my life. And so I'm glad that you found the same outlet of going to see somebody. A lot of people don't understand of going to talk to somebody that doesn't have a connection to you and that knows, about your emotions, your feelings, and what what to go through and how to navigate your life like that is so beneficial.
It was so good for me. And I thought I was just going to find out why do I dress? Why am I like this? You know, why do I do this? What I do? You know, and also, where do I want to go? At that point, when I saw the
turn my
therapist,
phone off.
at that point, I was still just a cross-dresser. I didn't know even transgender is a bucket term. It's a bucket term for cross-dressers, drag queens, drag kings, non-binary. It's a bucket term or umbrella term for all that. I didn't know that until I went to therapy. But I thought I was just going to figure out where do I go from here. I didn't know if I wanted to transition fully. It took me at least 2 years before I decided that I did want to get on hormones and transition. But she really delved into my relationship with my parents.
Yeah.
Had a very rough upbringing with both my mom and dad. Mom was an alcoholic and drug addict. She died when I was very young. I was, I think, 27 when she died.
Wow.
Yeah. And Dad was a disciplinarian. He was verbally abusive more than physically abusive, but I got a lot of beatings. Probably I needed it. I lived with my mom, and she worked in a bar at night, and I just ran the neighborhood as a grade schooler.
Yeah.
Supposed to be watching my brother, and I didn't. I'd just go do what I wanted to do. And my dad beat discipline into me, and usually the belt spankings and things.
Yeah.
But I'm not for that personally. But again, I look back on it, and I'm like, he probably kept me from being in jail someday and beat discipline in me. I probably needed it, but I don't think it's the way to raise kids now. But
so, how did you come up with the name Trish? I know you told me, but they don't know.
Yeah. I wish I had a better story.
I like this story.
Well,
I mean, even that and your middle name too, if you want to disclose.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you I'm an open book. So a guy gave me the name. A guy I was seeing, and it turned out it was a ex-girlfriend's name. I didn't know that at the time, but he told me he wanted to call me Trish because I didn't have a name yet. This was 25 years ago when I got the name Trish. Probably 18 or 20 years ago. And I liked it because I grew up with a girl. I grew up with a couple twins that lived up the street. We hung out with a lot. One of their names was Trish. She was very adamant. Don't call me Trisha. Don't call me Patricia.
It's Trish.
It's Trish. And she would fight you if you called her that. And I just always liked her spunk and attitude. And so when he gave me the name Trish, I was like, oh, I know a Trish. I like that name. So I stuck with it. The middle name was a little harder to come up with. I didn't actually give myself the middle name until last year. I legally changed my name in August, was when it officially happened. But a couple months prior to that, I'm putting in paperwork. I'm working with Shook, Hardy, and Bacon. They give me the application that we have
Who is
to.
it?
Shook, Hardy, and Bacon.
Okay, you're going to have to tell me who that is.
They're one of the largest law firms in the country. I think one of the top 10 law firms in the country. They're huge. But they're headquartered here. And a friend referred me to them. They actually help transgender people change their name and gender markers for free. They do it, well, not for free, but pro bono.
Yeah.
The only thing you have to pay is court costs. So I was working with them. They explain the process. They give you an application to fill out, and they send this as a deposition to the courts to petition to say, we want to change the name and we want a court date. And it asked me for my middle name, and I was like, holy cow, I've never given myself a middle name. I had given myself a first and last name, or a guy gave me my first name. I've always gone by Michaels. My last name was really Barlow. So my middle name was Michael as a male. And
Michael's a hell of a name, I'll tell you that.
I like the name Michael. I didn't care for my last name just because of my upbringing. I wanted to get away from that family. I grew up, a lot of my family was racist and bigoted. And I just didn't want that last name anymore. So when I started a social media presence as Trish, I went by Trish Michaels, so nobody would discover who I really was.
Yeah.
But I just grew fond of Trish Michaels. It sounded better to me, had a better ring to it. So I kept Trish Michaels all that time. But I never had a middle name. So I'm trying to fill this paperwork out for the court, and I'm scrambling. I can't think of any good middle names, so I have a text with my ex-wife and my daughter, and I put all my office workers that I work with. We're in kind of a bullpen area. I'm asking them for names, and then I have a lot of friends from Strawberry Hill that I put on a text chain, and everybody's throwing out middle names, and I'd run it by my ex-wife and daughter, because my daughter, she's the one I wanted the most input from.
Yeah.
So people were throwing out Marie and Michelle and, just common middle names. And a few people threw out crazy names like Cher. And it's like, no, honey, I can't pull Cher off. So I'm running all these names by, and I think I was on Marie. But my friend Andy Ryan, who you know.
Uh-huh. Andy.
Shout
out to Andy. Great
yeah,
people.
Hi, Andy
Great
Ryan.
people. Yeah.
She asked me I only have one tattoo. And it says, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong because I don't speak Spanish very well. It says in Spanish, it says Vivir mi vida, which means live my life. It was a Mark Anthony song that I really love. And I identified with that. I was like, I'm finally living my life as I'm meant to be now. The one that's going to make me happy for once in my life. I never loved myself until I became Trish. So I identify with that song, and I got the tattoo, and she says, what's it mean? And I said, well, it means live my life in Spanish. And she was Googling it, and she found out vida is a gender neutral term for life. I didn't even know that. She goes, how about vida? And I was like, I never would choose. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, I kind of like it though. And I ran that by my daughter, and my daughter said, oh, I love that. And so we probably got 10 more names from people. And every time, Marie, Vida. She'd always say, no, I like Vida. Had one was Nova.
I don't know, like Nova.
Yeah, I didn't like that one either. There were some very good ones that were thrown out. My boss gave me a lot of good ones. But every name I threw out, my daughter would say Vida. And I said, I'm feeling the same way. So we stuck with Vida, and I'm glad I did. I like it. It's unique. I get asked about it a lot. Even when I did the court case, I told you the judge's name. I can't even remember his name, though. Huh?
The Clapper?
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
I think it was Clapper. Yeah, Judge Clapper. I was extremely worried about the court case because I was told he was a conservative judge. And, Kansas is really fighting people being transgender. Originally, they said you couldn't change your name. You can't change your gender marker. You can't change your birth certificate. Then they backed off, and they were allowing you to change your name, but not your gender marker or your birth certificate. So I'm just panicked. I'm getting a conservative judge. I'm told nobody ever does it in court cases anymore. They always do a Zoom, or they just have you file a deposition. They make a decision. I get the one judge who wants to do it in person in court. So I'm panicked. I'm sweating in court. And I'm thinking the worst. And he could not have been sweeter.
He's a great judge.
He greeted me as Trish as soon as I walked in the door. And we got started. He read his part. And the lawyer asked me a lot of questions why I want to change and all that. And I just go through an answer. And then it goes back to the judge for his decision. And he was like, before I make my decision, I'm just curious. Because you have a very unique name, Trish Vida Michaels. Because I like that. I'm always curious how people come up with these names. And so I told him the story, and he was like, I really like that. He says, you put a lot of thought into it. You included loved ones. He goes, I see no reason why you shouldn't be Trish Vida Michaels going forward. And he slams his gavel and makes it so. And I immediately start crying. I could uncontrollably. And it wasn't until after that he and my lawyer were talking. My lawyer had mentioned he's the only judge that still does in-person court cases. And he mentioned that, he feels he's old school, feels courts were made for people.
Yeah.
He goes, I hope it wasn't a problem. Trish, do you have a problem with that? He kept calling me Miss Michaels, I should say. And I said, actually, now that I said I was worried in the beginning we were doing it in person, But now that we did that, it makes the story
Makes it even better.
so much
Yeah.
more to me. And you have been so nice, and so I'm happy you did. And I'm still bawling like a big baby. So I hold a special place in my heart for Judge Clapper
Yeah,
now.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you have a very powerful story, and I know you don't think so, but you really do. And like, it's not easy for you to do what you did, but I know it's just like you just felt like you were somebody different, and then you are now comfortable in who you are, and which is very. I mean, that's huge, and that's I love that about you. Is that you have confidence, and I'm Trish.
Well,
You
here's
love me
the
or hate
thing,
me.
though. I had confidence for the last, like I said, we've been divorced 7 years. I had confidence that whole time as Trish in my personal life. But at work, I was still Scott
Yeah.
until last year. And
So that was going to be like my next question. Like, how long did it take for you to, because you felt the confidence at home. How long was it until like you felt the confidence to actually go out and do that? And
yeah, so I had always worked as Scott, and I won it just like it was hard. Again, I didn't come out to my wife. Just like it was hard coming out to her, though, once I did, when she found out, it was even harder for me to come out to an entire company.
yeah,
I would tell coworkers and share pictures, and some of them would go out me as Trish. But I had trouble telling an entire company. I was afraid I wouldn't be accepted by everybody. And I'd never worked with anybody transgender. I had lots of transgender friends in Kansas City, but I only knew of 2 that had actually transitioned at work. So I was scared to death. Till I worked for a company called Grail out in San Francisco. I was a remote employee for them, and I worked with the first person I've ever worked with who was transgender. And it gave me the confidence that I could finally do it. And so I'd planned on transitioning there 2 years ago. I was a contractor. My boss, everybody on the team was in favor of it. They said, we want you to be your most happy you. So I was ready to do it, but I was a contractor, and I said, I'd rather wait till I convert. I was supposed to convert at a year. Unfortunately, the company was told they had to sell by the courts. They had too big of a competitive advantage, and so I got laid off, along with a lot of other people. So I didn't get to transition there 2 years ago like I wanted, but I was confident I was going to do it. I was ready. So I told myself when I got laid off, I'll just have to find another company and start over. I'll still be Scott and wait till I'm comfortable enough with the team to tell them, and then I'll come out at work. And I do want to transition at work.
Yeah. So are you going into work, or are you just like, is this like a work from home? Like, are you going to work
the
as
last
Scott?
10 years I've worked from home, but I was always on video calls.
Gotcha.
And I was always Scott. So I got laid off, I think in January last year, and I've never gone more than 2 weeks without a job. Well, this time it had been a month, and I wasn't getting any interviews. And I was fed up. The market became terrible. Lots of tech companies out in the Bay Area, which is a lot of the jobs I've had over the last 10 years. A lot of the tech companies were laying off lots of recruiters. And you would see a job get posted, and 2 hours later, 500 applicants have applied.
Jeez.
It was incredibly hard to get interviews. And I was like, well, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. And so I changed my name to Trish Michaels on my resume. And I said, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start fresh at a company as Trish. And so the first company that called was like a week after I changed my name on there. And it's the current job I work at now. And the interview went extremely well. They asked me to tell me a little bit about yourself. And I told them, I said, well, obviously I'm transgender. It was a video interview. And I told them my current name is actually this. I am in the process of changing my name, but it's still legally Scott Barlow. And they're like, we're fine with all that. Your application will have to say Scott Barlow, but we'll let you use your preferred name until your name's legally changed. And I thought it went great. I was super excited about it. And then I didn't hear anything for over a month. I was like, I guess that one's out. And I didn't get, I take that back. I had 2 more interviews, but they were with agencies. Never went anywhere with their clients. And then out of the blue, Academy Bank, who I work for, called me again and wanted me to come in for an in-person interview. And it just felt like home. They made me feel so comfortable there and made me an offer, and I accepted. And I was so excited because I was going to actually work as my true self.
Yeah.
Almost didn't happen, though, because the day before, Sunday, I started on a Monday. Sunday, I had a panic attack. I felt like a complete imposter. I didn't think I was going to be accepted by the company.
Yeah.
I literally was hyperventilating at home.
But I bet you that's a normal feeling, though.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I didn't know that because I'd never experienced that, but I was in complete panic. And
so I'm sure you're
I
worried.
reached out to my ex and my daughter, and then I thought, I'm going to reach out to the 2 girls I know that have transitioned at work.
Yeah.
And I only got a hold of one of them, but she immediately called. And she's like, honey, imposter syndrome, it's going to be there for a while. But you're Trish. And people will accept you. And if they don't, most likely they're not going to say anything about it at work.
Yeah.
So do it. You got this. And you're going to never, you'll never be this happy ever again.
Yeah.
And she talked me off the ledge, and I'm glad I did. I didn't know until I started that one of the people I work with, who was a big part in bringing me to the company, was raised by somebody who was transgender.
Oh,
she didn't share
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
I also didn't know that there's other transgender people in the company. I think there's 5 that I know of.
Yeah.
So we have a very diverse and inclusive environment at the company, which is great.
Sounds like you got a good company to work for.
Yeah, I love it.
Good.
I love it. And now first and foremost, I should tell you too, as a corporate recruiter, I'm the first corporate recruiter they've ever hired. They've never had one. So the fact that they chose to hire someone who's transgender to be the face of their hiring
good for
means
them.
the world to me.
Yeah.
Means the world to me.
Well, it shouldn't matter on like what you look like or who you are. It matters if you're good at your job.
We claim we're very diverse and inclusive, and now I can be the face of the company and tell people when they ask me, what's your diversity and inclusion policy? I mean, what's it like? I can speak to it from personal experience now.
So so you told me like about work. What about like you're like going out in public, like finally feeling the confidence, like just being yourself and just walking out of the house and just kind of
it's
being you.
It is when you first go out in public as someone who's dressing, whether fully transitioned or not, it is extremely nerve-wracking because, in my opinion, most people who go out in public dressing for the first time, they're not real good with makeup. They're probably wearing a cheap wig. And I'm talking from experience. This was my experience. I was horrible at makeup. I had an extremely cheap wig. You could tell it was a guy in a wig everywhere I went. So at first I was just going to parks. I would see people drive by and they would see me, and it was no big deal because I wasn't interacting with them. But then I got started going to casinos. And I wouldn't try to talk to anybody. I would walk in with my head down, no confidence at all. I would sit at a slot machine and play. Occasionally women would talk to me. Men would almost never talk to me. As I got more comfortable, I started getting better with makeup, started buying higher end wigs, trying to pass. That's the goal of anybody who's transgender, is trying to pass.
Sure.
I hope someday I'll be there 100%, but I know I'm not. But I feel like I'm close. The more confidence I got, though, I would walk in and I would have my, chest out and my chin up, and I would still feel the stares. And you still get those. You just learn to ignore them.
Yeah.
What was the biggest learning curve for me was actually dealing with people who had comments about you.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah, so I had a few run-ins. And I didn't handle it well. One of my first run-ins was at a Quick Trip over off of Truman Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was pretty confident in myself. You know, I'd walk in feeling like I looked like $1 million. I felt pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And it was two younger gentlemen, probably 24, 25. And they were like, yo, that's a dude in a wig. And they were 2 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And I was like, F off. You're being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse my French. I don't know if you have to beep that out.
No, you're good.
I said, you're being completely disrespectful. And poor the cashier's chin just dropped. And I paid and I grabbed my stuff and walked out, and they chased me to my car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running in high heels, and I get in, lock my door, and they pointing their finger at me like they're going to shoot me, and threatening to don't ever come around here again. And I just gave them the bird and drove off.
Yeah.
And told my therapist about it that week, and she's like, don't do that. Don't do that. You could get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You need to let it go. And it didn't register.
Yeah, it's hard though.
It was very hard. I was so angry. And it wasn't maybe a month later, I just happened to be up street at 7th Street Casino. I started going there a lot dressed.
Mm-hmm.
People were very nice to me there. I got hit on by guys a lot, which I loved, obviously.
Hey, it means, yeah, you're doing something right.
I loved that. Yeah. And I got to know the bartenders. I'd go get a drink, sit at the bar and talk to the bartender. And one day they're making me a drink, and a gentleman scoots over at the bar and he goes, are you a man? And he was really drunk. I said, I'm a transgender female. And I should say, I don't ever say I'm a man or a woman. I always say I'm transgender female out of respect to women.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm a transgender female. And he said, no, you're a man. And I said, I'm transgender. Thank you. Please leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it again. And I got angry and I stood up and threatened him and told him to F off. And they immediately kicked that guy out because he was hammered.
Yeah.
I apologized. I felt really bad. Saw my therapist again that week and told her, and she goes, that's twice in a month. We need to talk about this. And she says, you have to realize it takes a lot more courage for you to go out and be your true self.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you're going to get ridiculed, you're going to get stared at, you're going to get people calling you names. It takes a lot more courage for you to do that than it does for them to belittle you and call you names and say you're a dude. You just need to find a way to deal with it. And I'm much better with that now, thankfully.
Yeah. Like I said, it's still tough though.
It is still tough. I'm used to walking in anywhere. I'm comfortable walking in anywhere as myself. I'm very confident now. I don't really care what people think, but I'm used to you walk by and they go, double take. I'm used to that. I kind of smile at that. I play the game in my head where they're thinking that's a guy dressed in women's clothes, but I tell myself, oh, they think I'm pretty.
Hey,
that's how I deal with it.
Yeah.
You just have to ignore people's reactions. But on the positive side, I get lots of men and women who tell me they're proud of me and tell me I'm doing a good job and then I'm beautiful. And so that balances things out. So thanks to my therapist. I couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah.
I couldn't have had the confidence without her. So,
yeah, kind of going back to that because we'll hit on this a little bit too. You walked by here plenty of times, and you stood at the garage. And I remember we would always kind of yell at you, just like, not in a bad way, guys, but yell at you like, "Hey, you can come in." Like,
hey, hooker.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
But we were like, hey, come in. And you would look in and you would kind of scope it out.
I was intimidated by the cigar bar lounge.
Mm-hmm. And I get it.
I think we talked about this once, and I came in and I asked you if you served alcohol, and you told me no, but I can go next door and bring something in. I was welcome to. And I was like, oh, it's okay. And I walked out and didn't come back in. I was intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that I wasn't confident in being me. But this is a very classy place.
Well, thank you.
I didn't know if I would fit in.
You fit in just perfect.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad I've came now. So,
And that's like a testament to, I'm not saying all, but mostly all cigar smokers. And, when you get on a cigar lounge, like I said, not every cigar lounge, but most of them, you're going to sit down, and as long as you provide good conversation and you're a good person, people don't care how much money you make, what you look like, what color you are. They don't care. Like,
I found that out my first time here.
Yeah.
I'm not counting the time I came in and walked right back out. The time that Tim brought me.
Actually sat down, yeah.
The time Tim brought me. As I said, I didn't think I'd stay very long because of the smoke. It wasn't bad, but it gave me nostalgia. And my ex, who came last week, said the same thing. It reminded her of her grandfather smoked cigars.
Yeah.
And she goes, it reminds me of my grandfather.
That's good.
She didn't think she was going to stay very long either. She stayed for a few hours. But it was the people that drew me in.
Yeah.
I don't know how many hugs I got that night from men and women. Several said, "Oh, I don't shake hands. Come here and hug me." And they were so accepting. And it's not just me; they're like that of all newcomers here.
And that's what I mean. It's like no one cares. No one really cares here. No one cares as long as you're good people. And like I tell people, it's like once you become a part of like our cigar lounge community, you're family.
Yeah. And that was the day before you did the 1920s party, and all the people that was sitting with Tim and I.
You came in the day before that?
The day
that was
before.
The first time?
It was a Thursday.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was months before that. Shows how bad of a memory I have.
The first time coming with Tim and Jen was a Thursday, the day before that. And several people kept saying, "You should come."
I do remember that because we sat over here.
Yeah, we were right there. Yeah.
Yep.
And they were like, "You should come." And I was like, "I have nothing to wear for that era." And they're like, "Just put on a nice dress and go to, the Party Warehouse or somewhere and get a bandana with the feather or something." And it's like, "All right, I'll come." And if you've not been to one of his parties here like that, you got to come.
Well, thank you.
It was one of the coolest parties I've ever been to.
You did have a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I met so many great people that night. Met your wife that night.
Yeah.
And got so many hugs from people, and everybody was just so great to be around. And I was kind of hooked at that point. I think I had told somebody that weekend, I said, "I think I've gotten more hugs in the last 2 days than I've had in the last 6 months."
Yeah, there's hugs everywhere.
It's just, it's a great environment. Like you said, it's a very social. I didn't know cigars were so social. I thought it was going to be a bunch of people sitting around smoking and not talking.
Well, some lounges are like that, but it's like it just depends on how you make your lounge. Like, because this is a very, like, you sit around, you talk, or you just kind of chill. But it's especially like a Friday night. If you haven't been here on a Friday, you got to get here on a Friday.
Absolutely.
Those are like the nights it's kind of popping. You always got the live music. You guys always sit here, just have a great time. The booze comes out, and I'm like having to kick you guys out.
Great entertainment usually,
11:30.
and great conversations.
So you are 56, 57.
Be 57 in May.
57. What would you say to yourself probably when you started this journey? Now that you're here, like knowing what and it's still a long journey. Don't get me wrong, but you're far in your journey, and like you are.
Yeah.
I know that you're way more comfortable being out and doing things, and you feel more like yourself now. But like, what would you tell yourself when you were just like kind of starting to feel this and starting to like, is this okay, or am I going to have to deal with this and that?
Yeah, I asked myself that a lot. I think ideally I would have loved to come out when I was much younger. Makes your transition so much easier. However, I grew up in a time where, I graduated high school in the mid-'80s, and you didn't really talk about people being gay. You knew who was gay, but you didn't really talk about it. You didn't ask people. You didn't talk about it. And then in the military, I was in during the don't ask, don't tell. I could have been put in jail for being gay in the military.
Which is crazy to think about now.
It is extremely crazy, let alone being transgender.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a different time where it just wasn't as socially there were people that were dressing back then. Kudos to them. They had a lot of courage.
Yeah.
I did not. I grew up in a very conservative family. I didn't actually, by the time my ex found out, my parents had both passed. I don't know that if they were still alive, if I would be this far ahead. If I had to change anything, my biggest regret is still not coming out to my wife earlier.
Yeah.
And letting her decide, is that something she wants to accept or absolutely not? I can't deal with that. I just wish I hadn't lied to her. It's my biggest regret in life that I lied to her for so many years. Because I think the world of her. She's a great girl. Mm-hmm. So I wish I hadn't lied to her for so many years. I still don't know if I would have transitioned until later in life.
Yeah.
But better late than never, and I'm happy that I did it.
Now, my last question. Yeah, this is like, see, we're already an hour in. Flew by. Mm-hmm. You were all worried. But, so my last question before we end this is, what would you tell someone that's going through the same journey? Because there's plenty of people out there that go through the same journey that
Absolutely.
don't speak up or don't want to say anything, but maybe need that little...
I get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's on social media where I don't know who they are. They're anonymous. Mm-hmm. Other times it's someone who's met me in public. I actually had someone come out to me at work, mm-hmm. and they have transitioned now. They felt I inspired them, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what people tell me. They never said that, but I was honored that she came out to me at work. But I tell people all the time, first and foremost, there's no path that you can follow. My journey is not going to be the same as yours. Mm-hmm. You have to find your own path, what you're comfortable with. When you're comfortable with coming out to family and friends, I can give you tips on makeup and stuff. I have mm-hmm. lots of videos that I've watched. I've had countless videos on makeup and wigs and stuff. And I would say I'm still not great at it, like some ladies. But the first thing I tell them is find a good therapist. And mm-hmm. I'll recommend mine because I thought she was amazing. Yeah. She's part of the LGBTQ community. She let me find my own path. Mm-hmm. I did have one therapist I saw before her who was like, let's talk about hormones. I was like, I don't know that I want that yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want yet. Mm-hmm. And I decided she wasn't right for me. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of bad therapists out there, unfortunately. Not only for LGBTQ, but for cis people as well, or straight people, if you will. But this person that I saw just was constantly, I was like, I don't know if I want to transition or just stay a cross-dresser. I don't know. Yeah. She said, why do you have to decide?
You don't.
Why can't you do both and be happy at both? And so that's why I went for the first couple of years. But the longer I did that, I realized I was happiest as Trish. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be him anymore. I don't want to live two lives anymore. Especially doing the job I do. I'm on video every day. And every time I saw myself as him, mm-hmm. I would cry at least once a day. So that's when I made the decision I need to transition fully and get on hormones and start. I kind of did a slow transition too. I started out really, really low dose. But yeah, my recommendation is first, see a therapist. Second, join some groups.
Yeah. I think it sounded like that was impactful. That group.
It was extremely impactful because I didn't understand a lot of things that were going on, especially when I started dreaming as Trish. Mm-hmm. I'd never done that. At one point, I started dreaming as Trish, and I was like, I'd wake up thinking I'm Trish, and now I'm realized, oh, you're a guy.
Yeah.
And it was very confusing to me. Mm-hmm. And all the other girls were like, yeah, I've had that. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen, but that just means that's who you're meant to be.
Yep.
So yeah, being able to talk in groups, there's several transgender groups out there, whether it's the girls' night out that we do with dinner and drinks. There's one at a transgender institute where they get together and sit in a circle and they talk about all kinds of stuff. And, that was incredibly impactful for me.
That's good.
But definitely the therapist was the biggest one. because you have to decide your own path. There's no rush. There's no time frame. I have one friend, like I said, she came out to me on social media, and I told her, I said, see a therapist first. And then, let me know when you have questions. We can talk, we can meet. I'll be part of your support group if you like. And then like 2 months later, she came out to her family, came out to her fiance. Actually, I think she was married. Came out to her wife, came out at work, changed her name on her license. I was like, what the heck? You've done me. I said, I haven't even changed my name yet. So kudos to her.
Yeah.
That she was able to just rip the Band-Aid off and do it and had the confidence to do it. I didn't. It took me steps and stages. So mine may have been a little bit longer transition than other people's.
Everybody's journey is different.
It totally is, yeah. And that's why I try to get people to understand right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So,
well, Trish, this has been awesome. I really do feel honored that you agreed to come on and tell your story. And I am super proud of you.
Thank you.
I really do.
I told you I'm honored to be on here. You've had some wonderful guests on the show.
You're right up there now.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this is an awesome story. I'm glad that people get to see it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. This has been great. And then now we get to chill and smoke our cigars.
That's right.
And drink some and have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
I hope everybody will come join us.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you guys. Like I said, tune in to us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you haven't, and check us out next week. And we'll see you guys later.
Goodbye, everybody.